So I think it's a great session on sustainability because it looks like a sustainable weekend at IIM. Yesterday, the first half, 50 of us spent, I think many of the panelists as well, on this concept called circular economy. So there were people from government, people from academia, and entrepreneur, activists, all of us were probably talking about the whole afternoon, the whole first half yesterday on circular economy. So here we are again probably towards the end of it, this session, bringing up the same topic. So it seems like, this is no longer a fad. I think it is going to hit us pretty badly. It hit us already in many parts of the world as well. The sustainability is going to be very, very important thing. If you're not setting up for it, there's going to be a disaster. If you look at from Bangladesh, I was there like 6 months back. The Yamuna has become 6 miles wide, right? There's people living in the banks, they just keep moving. How far? They'll come to India pretty soon. So that's the level it is, right? So, but I want to start with a positive note. Earlier this year, there was a session by Ricky Cage on Sustainability Festival. I was very happy to hear that there was a person from NASA mentioned that the ozone is healing. It's a great news because all the effort being put on, all the last probably 2 decades pretty much, about it is making an impact. But it's not good enough. So there has to be more and more to be happening. So that's what we are going to talk about today. Today this topic around the businesses side, but I also want to emphasize the point, we may touch a little bit, but it is not about businesses because we are all very good in blaming someone else. Because always we blame that company, this company and all that. But individually everyone is responsible on sustainability, right? I was talking to a HNI person. She's running a big sustainability campaign and all that. I said, why are you not using metro, right? She said, don't ask me to take public transport. So here is a responsibility about each and every individual about what are you doing for sustainability. If you're not doing, the companies cannot because they are reacting to the market. So if you want an apple that looks like a Kareena Kapoor, they have to put a wax on it, yeah? But if you take this apple, Shimla apple, very uneven, looks like crazy, then there is a sustainability possible, yeah? So what are you looking at? I'm glad that someone mentioned this earlier session out about this market, the way the food is. So everything, what are you wearing, right? What are you probably eating? And sorry people, all the suits and all because we are IIM, but I always joke about people in Chennai, this 42 degrees centigrade, people sit on suits and you have a AC at 17 degrees, right? Thanks to Rajinikanth and Kabali, right? With this all 3-piece suit. The guy probably, on this everywhere as well, 3-piece suit is happening. So are we sensitive enough as an individual? How are we doing on, otherwise the sustainability is going to be an amazing topic, probably end of a conference. It may not be a beginning of a conference, right? So with that, we'll start the context. Coming back to the businesses side, the circular economy, I think Anupama mentioned about this great example of Sahas, which organized the event yesterday, which does a zero waste campus. This campus looks clean thanks to Sahas because 900 kgs of waste we produce every day in the campus, 85% is recycled, right? So that is why. So she got an award about Global Citizen of the World, telling the UN how the world should manage the waste. So like these entrepreneurs are making an amazing impact. Now the wet waste from this campus going into making bio-CNG that is running Sahas vehicles. Right? So waste is running the vehicles as well. Then the byproduct, you have compost, the farmers are buying it from, so you are able to make a circular economy. That is one side of it. But these are all entrepreneurs doing it. But you look at from the business side, I have a company invested called SolarOn. We watched 1,000 stocks listed in New York and London Stock Exchange. So we look at them on ESG, right? Environment and social and governance. So you have Bangladesh, there is a fire in the garment factory. There is some big apparel company stock goes down in the US. So that's the link today, people are missing out. So it doesn't matter whether you are small or a big, if you're not watching sustainability, you have a problem. We have to follow triple bottom line. You see that some of these companies are already putting out double bottom line reports, P&L, but triple bottom line is the way to go if you want to have a sustainable one. So with that context, I'm going to probably open up the session with inviting my team. I think we have a fantastic team, starting from Shell. So it's a great example of how an established company internalizing sustainability, right? Before my SolarOn goes and tell them, hey, you are lagging on ESG, how do I wake up myself? But I'm really glad Ravi is here from Shell. He's going to talk about the future of the fuel source, and it's going to be an interesting topic. Please, Ravi, join us. And then, so Ravi is a director at Shell India, and he has very interesting technology, very top secret, IH2, and he told me only 1 minute about it. So very discreet, but hopefully that's going to change the world, let's hope. The second, I'm going to invite Mohan, Krishna Mohan, and he's a director at Household Care. So the way we position is that if you're a big company, you internalize this sustainability, how you are going to do it yourself, right? And if you cannot afford BSL, then you can hire our man in Novozymes. He will come and help you analyze your chain and figure out where you can go to sustainability. So next, I'm going to invite Shubha from Biome. I'm sure people from Bangalore. So Bangalore knows Biome, and Vishwanath, who is a very instrument part of what's happening in Bangalore in sustainability. If you're polluted enough, right, what can you do with the pollution? Anirudh have a fantastic answer for it. So with that, I'm going to have Ravi going to talk about this future source of the fuel. So once they're finished, we'll probably go a little deeper about asking some tougher questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to talk about sustainability, and Naga here has talked about future fuels. What I'd like to say is that the option that we have to convert waste to fuels, and that to drop-in fuels, which really means that you can take the fuel and put it into the fuel tank of your car, is here today, and that's what I'll be talking about. The technology is called IH squared. It stands for Integrated Hydropyrolysis and Hydroconversion. People in the chemical industry would recognize what we are talking about. And before you get too excited and go and buy Shell shares, this is my disclaimer to you. Please do your own due diligence of this. So we'll move on. The basis of all that we do to come up with newer and newer technologies is driven by our energy transitions program in Shell. And what we believe is that the energy needs of the world are going up significantly, and we need more and more affordable forms of energy. We see the role of carbon in the whole global warming exercise, and we need to address this in ways that are sustainable for the future. And that's the story of IH squared, converting waste to fuels. So what is IH squared? It is an innovative process. It was discovered by the Gas Technology Institute around 8-9 years ago. It converts any form of biomass into drop-in fuels. So drop-in fuels means petrol, diesel, and we have a byproduct called biochar. So typically you get, for every 100 tons of biomass, you get around 26 to 30% of fuel, and you get around 13 to 15% of biochar produced. This is this use proprietary catalyst. We have a subsidiary called CRI, a wholly owned subsidiary called CRI, which specializes in catalysts, and we make this. Compared to most of the other technologies, this is an exothermic reaction. So being an exothermic reaction, it does not depend on external heat, and therefore you see how it really contributes to the reduction of the carbon footprint on a life cycle basis. It's been developed by Shell and its partners since 2010. So it is a fairly unique process. It uses municipal solid waste, it uses agricultural waste, and it can process up to 15% plastics. So this is, since it's an exothermic reaction, it can go up in scale. So you can actually have much higher capacities. So typically the capacities that we would like to see in this is around 1,000 tons per day, 2,000 tons per day. And if you take 15% plastics in that, that's very typically around 150 tons in one unit being processed. It recovers about 76%, up to 76% energy, and it lowers greenhouse gases by up to 92% compared to fossil fuels. It uses commercially proven hardware. Most of the hardware there is in refining. It's being used in refining, and the diesel that comes out of this is actually conforms to BS6 specifications. I think all of you will be aware that BS6 specifications will come into play in 2020. So this is actually a fuel for the future, and it is economic at the So let's look at a little bit about how this does. You look at biomass, it's a combination carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. It is heated to around 400 degrees centigrade. It breaks it, it's like a hammer, quite like a process that's been through number fitness and very fit really to break down at a molecular level to smaller molecules, and then in the presence of hydrogen and catalyst, the oxygen is removed, and you get water and you get hydrocarbons, which are typically in the range of petrol and diesel. The maximum, the heaviest molecules are in the diesel range of. So fuel molecules without oxygen is the end state. So as I said, we operate with a whole set of partners. There are at least 12 partners who has helped us in this technology over the last 9 years. Essentially, the process comprises of two reactors. The first is the hydropyrolysis reactor. The second is the hydroconversion reactor. The hydropyrolysis reactor is a bubbling fluidized bed. Hydrogen is kind of sent in from the bottom. It is pressurized to around 26 bar. The temperature there in the reactor is around 400 degrees centigrade. And at that temperature and pressure, the molecules are broken down into smaller fractions. The presence of catalyst takes away the oxygen and combines that to form water and carbon dioxide. And what you have at the end of that is a total liquid product, which is actually distilled to get the fractions of petrol and diesel. So it forms, as I said, it operates to any kind of waste, municipal solid waste. It uses agricultural waste, and this is the kind of product that you get, completely water white liquid for both petrol and diesel. And what we have actually done is to test these fuels in BMW 7 Series and Ford Fortuner. So typically, this is what it can do. If you look at the case for India, there is around 780 million tons of agricultural waste which is generated on an annual basis. So if you take away almost 50% moisture and you reduce this for ash content, typically the soil that's attached to it, and assume that 250 million tons are available for use in an IS2 product, plant. Likewise, the municipal solid waste, we generate around 60 million tons per annum in India, and almost 50% is water. So you have something like 280 million tons of MSW and agricultural waste available to you. This 280 million tons is capable of producing 90 billion liters of petrol and diesel. And if you look at the consumption of petrol and diesel today, it is 120 billion liters. So essentially 75% of today's demand can actually be supplied from the waste that we generate in agriculture and in the cities. So essentially, when we look at the greenhouse gas emission, there is one cycle of emission and one cycle of consumption of carbon when we get fossil fuels on the ground, and then we burn it in the automobiles and things like that. So this process typically eliminates the first process where we have to bring the fuels from the ground. It delivers on all the missions of India, Swachh Bharat, be it in the agricultural sector, be it in the waste that is being generated in the cities. It contributes to energy security. As I said, 75% of the current transportation fuel demand can be met from this source. That will result in a huge savings of foreign exchange. This process really requires no extra water except for the makeup water in cooling towers. So very, very minimal amount of water is really used in this process. Of course, Make in India, Skill in India, and of course, when you look at the waste dumps that are there in all the cities, it will seriously contribute to the public health of the people living here.
Thanks, Ravi. I think we could buy the stock, I guess. Don't quote me. Okay, good. So I think with that, we will invite Mohan. Mohan is going to share about, here you could see that about Shell investing heavily and trying to do a research program to figure out one of the major issue in India, which we have this waste management. India is producing 1.5 lakh ton of waste every day. So look at the potential of how we could utilize this for the fuel. If you look at about the trade deficit, right? There are 3 reasons for the trade deficit in India. What are the reasons? We have a trade deficit, right? Yeah, agreed. Good. So what are three major ones for the trade deficit? Oil, number one. What is number two? Gold, yeah. We cannot touch our women, yeah. So every finance minister is cracking his head about any scheme. We won't believe in that. It's not it's not about sovereigns now. The dowry is in kgs now, yeah. So gold cannot be touched. What is the third one? Electronic. There you go. You touch your phone, right? Nothing is made in India. That's why the Make in India campaign is happening. So look at the potential of, how by having our own ability to produce fuel from the waste, how much can be reducing from the trade deficit point. So with that, Mohan, we're going to probably give you some exciting example about how companies could hire him to help them look at the sustainability as an answer.
All right, so I have 5-7 minutes to take you through and then inspire you in some of the new segments, and let me try to attempt that. So just a little bit in terms of why are we here and what are we talking about. So if you look today, where are we in terms of how the world has progressed? Of course, the Industrial Revolution has helped us give a lot of products and too much of products. And that probably is some of the problems that we're going to we need to tackle. And this, essentially, in terms of Industrial Revolution, has not come in the right way. It has come at the cost of nature, and it has also come at the cost of exploiting the natural resources that the earth has, right? And then if you try to look back and look at what does this mean, this actually means that the quality of life for a lot of people are still remaining the same, and it is actually low, right? And now, if you try to look from an Industrial Revolution perspective and take the next leap of the number of years ahead, what would that mean? And if we look at the future, so we have more people coming in. So today we are 7 billion plus people, and it's expected that we will have 10 billion by 2050. So we're adding a lot of people out into the planet. And remember, the planet Earth is still remaining the same. It's not growing. And what does this mean? That more people, higher consumption per capita. And this is going to drive a lot of strain on the economy, on the earth, on the planet, and it means a lot of things, right? It actually means that there is going to be a lot of pollution, more pollution, and resource depletion. So at this stage, I'd like you guys to focus on three numbers. So so we're going to add 3 billion people into the middle class by 2030. Today it is 2 billion. So of course it's fantastic when you get in 3 billion out of poverty into middle class. They have more money to spend and more food to eat. It's fantastic, but it comes at the cost of earth. These 3 billion, where are they going to be there? They're going to build up into new cities. We're going to destroy or change a little bit of the rainforests, and also have all these high rises. So for people who know IIMB, about 15 years back, this was a completely secluded place, and today we are in the midst of concrete jungle. And this is what is going to happen more and more. It actually means that it's going to change the fundamental character of cities, lifestyles, and bring in a lot of change. But the earth is essentially the same. So we need to feed these people, and we also need to make sure that everyone has that slice of action. So there is definitely now a very, very strong need for a sustainable solution that all of us needs to take. Naga was talking about an example of his colleague or friend trying to take the metro. But it is like those simple examples that every one of us have to take to make sure that we are contributing that small bit to this earth. So just a little bit in terms of theory, what is sustainability? So sustainability is about development that meets the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So this is in short what sustainability is all about. So Naga talked about triple bottom line. So this is essentially the triple bottom line. So companies and all of us as individuals need to develop this mindset in terms of what is it for environment, what is it in terms of society, economy. And this is what is called the triple bottom line. And there are many companies who are moving in this direction, and Novozymes happens to be one of them who have actually adopted this triple bottom line reporting format. So as a company, we are aimed, and this is our purpose. So we believe that together we find biological answers for better lives in a growing world. So with this context that we are talking about, where we're bringing in 3 billion people into the middle class, we are making sure that the challenges that comes up in relation to this, that is where we as a business will thrive and make our profits come from, right? So together, it's a very powerful word. We're not going to do it alone. We're going to do it together with academia, with customers, with partners, and it is that power of cumulativeness that we intend to make sure that we're making a difference. Biological answers, we choose biology because that's where nature is, and I think the answers to some of the most complex problems on this earth lives and comes from the simplest of the organisms, the cell. And it's good to go back into Mother Nature, look at the simplest of the simplest things of cell and find answers. That's what we have defined in terms of how we will approach this, this menace in terms of overexploitation and all the problems that comes along with it. For us, it's not also about a choice between better lives and it's about growing world. Both come in equal terms, right? So you can take an angle in terms of better lives, but you can also take an angle in terms of a growing world. We want to make sure that we are balancing both along this. So our purpose as a company is defined around these 6, 7 magical words. And what are we doing, right? So as a company, we are a B2B company, and we play into a lot of many other industries which we help essentially in water reductions, less water consumptions, also reducing the process time, and also replacing chemicals, thereby making sure that the earth is in a better shape, in a better place, and we can leave something back from a future perspective to the next generations. So we cut across many, many industries, and you're all budding entrepreneurs, and in that sense, we cut across many, many industries out there. So our technologies help essentially in replacing and reducing the CO2 emissions. So this is an example that I've tried to put in. So we cut across many of these things. And end of 2017, we have actually reduced 76 million tons of carbon dioxide. Our technologies have helped industries tackle this. And what does this mean? This actually means that 32 million cars have gone off the roads. That's the power of these simplest solutions that come from microorganisms. So this is what we're trying to look. So as a company, we actually help thrive, and we also help industries move and adopt to this better technology. So there's a little bit of theory. I'll not go into this, but essentially this is what I actually had.
So that shows about how many businesses are all over the world are very serious about solving. So this is from established organizations and trying to do their best for sustainability. But can we look from the entrepreneurial perspective, right? I would like to, Shubha is going to talk about Biome. Biome is very popularly known in Bangalore because Vishwanath has been pioneering the sustainability aspect of it. You might have seen Chitra as well, building very sustainable architecture in Bangalore for a while, which is known for a fantastic appeal as well. Lot of, they use this, the earth itself for the brick and all that, so sustainable architecture. So from Shubha perspective that she is going, I was asking this question earlier about 2/3 of the world is water, right? We have water problem. And if you look at probably people from Bangalore, you have this Vartur lake and it was throwing out foam, right? It was like 20 feet. So all these elements are all from the consumer perspective. As I mentioned earlier, if none of us are going to look at the individual social responsibility, these are all things going to continue. But yesterday in the circular economy, she was mentioning very fondly about the Jakur lake that they're able to revive, and there are fish in that. Shubha, go.
Yeah, sure. So we are a group that kind of started even before 2000. It's a very Bangalore-based, local, connected We didn't start off being a company, it was just a group of engineers, it happened to be so, who realized that Bangalore is getting its water from really far away from the river Kaveri, and which is being pumped at with a lot of energy, and at the same time the city is fortunate to be receiving rainfall for most parts of the year. So the thought was, do we have to really go far away to get our resources? Like what Naga mentioned, whether it be for construction, for our water, can we look at options that are close by? Can we make do with what's available and how much of it can really be done? So which is why we largely we started off with so that's our group, and we now think that we are working really at integrated urban water management, and it's really about building a water culture, a lot of which has already been with us, much like the circular economy or in the choice of detergents we use. How much water do we use? What do we use it for? How do we make sure we are responsible with our water? There can be solutions at different scales, and that's why we formed our company, to be able to see how these solutions can be implemented and how do we take it out to the larger populace. So that's just a photograph of all the kind of work that we do. At the simplest level, we started with rainwater harvesting. This was in 2007. We registered a company, Biome Environmental Solutions Private Limited. The company actually would go door to door to houses, to apartments, to layouts, and see if rainwater harvest, at this time rainwater harvesting was still not mandatory in Bangalore. It wasn't required by law, but we had in our own houses, in our friends and families' houses, kind of tried to see, is this a doable solution? Are there plumbers who are trained enough to be able to implement these solutions? And what really are the kind of queries that people have? So with that, we started off really small, from the smallest house till we were fortunate to have as clients IIM Bangalore, the Bangalore Metro. It helped that it was a group of engineers who moved in scale. We were able to do projects within Bangalore, and now we are doing projects across the country, but the emphasis was largely around rainwater harvesting. As we did more of this, what we realized is one bit of rainwater harvesting is when you store and reuse the rainwater, but what really happens to the water that's available below the ground? And even if you look at Bangalore, most of our water is groundwater. Even people who are getting water from Kaveri, if you're familiar with the numbers you need about 1500 million liters per day, but the water is not sufficient, and most of the water that we take out, more than 50% of the water we use is groundwater. While borewells are depleting, and water quality is falling in the borewells, people are at a loss to see how this water resource should be managed. And it's really because this water is connected, it does not belong to any one individual, it flows freely below the ground. And do we really own the water? Is it for us to pump it and sell it? What really are the slightly more moral questions around groundwater? So this really is about the evolution of the group, to say simply that as we did rainwater harvesting, you could store it and reuse it. You could use it for groundwater recharge, and the kind of questions we started getting were, I do recharge for my recharge well, but my neighbor benefits. So is that to my benefit at all? But really the questions are much more trickier, and which is where I'll move on to saying how we are somewhere between a private limited and a trust, because when you look at water, it's not really, or the kind of solutions that we try to provide, it cannot be totally for profit alone. Of course, profit has to be made, the company has to sustain, his employees have to be paid, but it's something like groundwater. To whom does it belong? And oftentimes we ask the question that if I were to, how much lower can I go down, and what are the resources that belong to me? If I dug deep, found gold, does it belong to me? Is it for me to sell? And a whole lot of questions like that. Yeah, and so really our emphasis has been on groundwater, which we see as a kind of resource that if we were all to come together and manage, it's a resource that can be managed. This is a well in Bangalore, and which is why the culture, that's what we've done to our wells. This well, if it could be a source of water at 10 feet, would be the water that comes to you for the lowest cost. When water is pumped from the Kaveri, we pay right now to the government 6 to 8 rupees for our first 1000 liters of water, whereas the cost the government incurs is about 36 to 42 rupees for pumping this volume of water to us. If we relied on groundwater, which is available at 10-20 feet and which is not hard to recharge, I'll speak further about it, you can have water for 1 rupee for every 1000 liters, and the water is yours for you, for your neighbors to share and to manage, and it's not very difficult. And that's what we've really been at. So here is a community not far from IIM Bangalore that had a well that was silted up, that had been junked much like the well earlier. with community effort, recharging, that well is now full, is a source of water. What this is, so it's not only, while it is about rainwater harvesting, a lot of these solutions are about people coming together. There have been livelihoods generated because these wells, now we've kind of made it smaller in size. These wells are really expensive if you were to go out and build now. These are irrigation wells, but domestic wells which are about 3 feet in diameter, 5 feet in diameter, which are very tricky to build. And we've been working with a community of well diggers called the Manuvadar community, largely who live around Sarjapura Road, Anikal, in the peripheries of Bangalore, who still retain those native skills to be able to build these wells. These wells can be both agents for recharge, where you put water into the ground, and could be sources of water as well. And when the community comes together, it's amazing, because when we dig a bore well, we don't know where our water really is coming from. And I don't know if I switch on my bore well tomorrow, am I going to get water or not? But in the well, it's right in front of you. You know what's going to happen tomorrow. When the water level falls down, you drop your water usage. When the water level comes up, you can have luxury. So very simply, but also we do a lot of services around water audits, because if you really look at it, rainwater harvesting is only a part. You need to know how much you're using. It's surprising the number of hospitals that call us, schools that call us, they really don't know how much water they use. And if you were to benchmark, know where you are with respect to your water consumption vis-a-vis other industries or similar businesses in the same industry, those numbers are still not available. So that's something we do. And as we grew as an organization, what we realized that people who could pay for our services, we could go help them out. But what about schools? They need water too. And how do you really go about, and it's not only about water, but education, about how you deal with water, sanitation, all of that. So we've been working with government schools, not just government schools, with private schools as well. Simple things like how do you test for water quality. When there is fluoride in water, your teeth turn brown, you have dental and skeletal fluorosis, what are solutions around that? So a lot of the work we do is also around education, awareness, engaging with children. Doesn't matter government schools, private schools, because we believe that it's amazing to see when children come together. We've had children build their own rainwater harvesting systems, and yeah, those are examples. And around water quality testing, working with self-help groups. And this is another thing that we largely believe, that what of sanitation? There is this thing about build your own toilets, but what happens to stuff that comes out from the toilet? What are the best ways, forget the toilet or the water that we use for bathing, that comes out from a washing machine, and like what Novozymes mentioned, what are the things that we can do to be responsible with our water use? And responsibility, we think now, is really if you're able to pick water from a source, and if you're able to put that water back at the same source, at almost the same quality that you got it, perhaps that's where you're responsible. A lot of this may seem theoretical, but we're really trying to work on solutions in this space and provide them as consultants. So that's a bit. We're also working on urban lakes. In Bangalore, we're all familiar with lakes. How do we imagine an urban lake? How do we get citizens involved? What is science in the context of urban lakes? There's a whole lot of work we do around that. It could be simple conversations, poem, poetry, dances, song. It could be that. It could be exercises. It could be birds, water quality. There's a whole lot of work that can be done around lakes. And cleaning up of the lakes, trash booms, floating wetlands to clean up wastewater. These are some of the solutions that we've been implementing with. And what we also believe is that you really need to, while we started off as engineers with our emphasis on technology and solutions, increasingly we are a lot more about communication, whether it be on social media, in the newspaper, just talking to people about what are all the solutions, and there are various players in the space, and how can everybody really come together to manage water better. And so that's a large part of it, about getting people to go see these wells, see the well diggers, photo exhibitions, getting all of that organized. And to be able to fulfill the demand, you have to be training at all times. You really realize that there are very few people who know how to maintain sewage treatment plants, very few people who actually know how to implement rainwater harvesting systems. It's a lot better than it was in 2007. There are a lot of independent vendors, but there's always a need for further training. That's something we do. There are always opportunities for volunteering. We try and build that in too. And this is what we think kind of ties all of it together, which is really about having a water conscience and being responsible. And where responsibility is really about, when I see water, it's small things like turning off your tap and seeing if it's leaking, reporting it, doing rainwater harvesting, making sure everybody, especially in an organization, is empowered to be able to do something about it. And we've developed some what's called the responsible water framework that we've been able to apply at several campuses, which then they've been able to take forward to actually make good progress both within and outside the fence. So that's the tricky thing about water. The moment you're relying on groundwater, within fence solutions are not sufficient. You really are looking at the community. You need to be spreading out. It's not okay for me to say that I brought down my consumption from 150 liters per day to 80 liters per day. But what of my neighbor? Where are they getting their water from? If I'm buying a tanker, am I okay? So these questions are very tricky, no simple answers, but we need to keep making improvements.
So I joke about, if you look at India's judicial system, around 2 million cases pending on real estate, right? These people get killed on about moving your fences, right? 1 feet, 2 feet, many of the villages across. But what about the water below, right? You may be putting like 10 bore wells in your place, you may be secured the entire water table. So it's very interesting, there is no much responsibility for us when it comes to the water table. So that awareness has to come. I was very glad. I was asking an engineering student about anything can be done. I was interested to see that in IIT Kanpur there is a student working on about understanding about the water table below. Right? We own a 1 acre land. How much water is available for you below the 1 acre? So can you warn if I start taking water from my neighbor, right? Then he'll start acting up. So this is going to be a very interesting thing what she mentioned about the water table. And so while this is getting ready, the technology side, so I'm going to ask probably a question to Ravi. If you look at the sustainability, right? We talk about yesterday also we talked about the circular economy where things are going to be recycled. That means it's going to be relatively expensive, right? So similarly, in the sustainability side, if you're going to be sustainable, it is going to be relatively expensive for them. So how do we bring this innovation in organization, keeping sustainability in mind? How the economics works, right? How do you get your funding? That's my question.
I think the first, before you get funding, I think you need to get your customer. And your customer will probably pay for you, pay for any kind of biofuel, as long as it is competitive with the fossil fuel that he buys from the petrol pump today. So the first attempt is really to ensure that the cost of drop-in fuels through the IH squared process compares favorably with the fossil fuels that is there. So what I believe is today in India, this is possible. This is possible for a host of reasons. The cost of setting up these kind of reactors is very, very cheap compared to the rest of the world. There are lots of tax incentives and things like that can be availed of. I mean, I think it would be beneficial if the government were to look at something more in terms of infrastructure status for things like waste. But prima facie, it is still attractive. And what we need to be conscious of today is that with free pricing of fossil fuels, the prices at the petrol pump varies almost on a daily basis. It goes up and down. And we need to match against that to make it competitive. And the good news is it is.
Excellent. So we have Ani ready. So now if you look at, Shobha's example about where we are already polluting, right? The water bodies are contaminated. There is efforts to be done to take care. So similarly, you see this picture and you saw the Delhi story recently. The pollution is everywhere. So Anirudh has come up with the amazing solution. I'm also glad to see that he's Forbes under 30. So this young generation is starting up to look at, because we have a lot of gray hairs in the room. So good to see that the younger generation is starting attacking this problem. And he has a very innovative solution. What to do with this pollution? Yeah, Ani.
Okay, I'll start with this picture. Can anyone guess what's happening over here? This, of course, yeah, there's a helicopter that you see, but this is actually a picture taken in Delhi when there was, like, I think a couple of months ago, when you see the whole Delhi pollution fiasco when it was happening, Delhi government actually proposing a solution that let's fly helicopters in the sky and spray water so that the pollution settles down. This is what is happening right now with the whole problem of pollution, that the such desperate measures are being taken. And as you all know that it's air pollution is floating in the air, and spraying water doesn't really solve the problem. As everyone knows, and I'm not much of a statistician, but air pollution costs massive. Like, to me personally, it's the effect that we have on our health, on people around us, But on a global economic level, this is the amount of damage that air pollution causes. And you probably have read newspaper reports about it, how bad it is, how worse it is getting, and how we all are a part of it. If you've been to Delhi during winters, like especially, you'll see the visibility is down to like less than 50 meters because of the smog. The schools are shut down during the winter seasons, and kids are not playing anymore in the playground. So all these things are happening. Now, when you see, like, this is a graph from Twitter that I took, that when you see what people talk about pollution, you know, it's a big thing, but the government needs to do something about it. It is not my problem, like in the sense that, yeah, but the solution has to come from outside. And what we have seen till now, like mostly like big major companies, governments, trying to implement these top-down solutions that definitely work in the long term. For example, to solve India's pollution problem, let's replace the entire fleet of cars and buses by electric cars, or make everything solar. Well, it sounds good in the theory, but these things require trillions of dollars of investment and tens of years and decades of time for these solutions to be developed. What we decided to do by the help of this project was, how do you target the bottom strata, where the people are, and move the impact upwards, rather than proposing the top-down solutions. Start a method in which people like us, regular people, activists, environmentalists, artists, everyone can come together and actually have a way to solve the problem of pollution, at least for the meantime. This was a picture I took way back in 2013. It's a very simple picture. You see, on one side you see human progress. You see power. There's a generator exhaust. It generates power. This is exactly how we generate power even today, like in our cars, in our engines, and so on, mostly. And on the right side, you see this very interesting pattern. This is a triangular shape that it makes, and essentially this shape is because of the pollution coming out of it. And this is exactly when it goes into your lungs. I have some of it in my pocket. This one, I guess, yeah. So this is what you are breathing in. This test tube has this particulate matter that when you're walking outdoors, this is what goes into your lungs. You're free to examine it afterwards. So you notice this pattern, and we said that, hey, this is making this mark. Why can't we collect it and see what happens? So we started taking these samples. So this is the particulate matter that comes out of these emission sources. So we said, let's conduct an experiment. So I went back to Boston, and on a weekend we said, like, let's do this little hack. We did this small experiment where we took a candle, and essentially any fossil fuel, when it's burnt, even when it's wax, it produces the same sooty like particulate that can be captured and then be used for something else. So we took this, built this contraption that would suck in this sooty particulate matter, and then eventually you mix it with a couple of solvents, and then you feed this output of this capture into a inkjet cartridge, and then we connected this little thing into a inkjet printer, and we said, can we print with it? So this experiment. This was one of those weekend ideas like that went well, and we were able to make this thing. This is ink with the candle smoke that came out. I put this idea out in the public, and a lot of people commenting it that, hey, you should probably start experimenting with this even more and see if we can actually use this to actually create a product that is around recycling air pollution. So Boston wasn't the best place for capturing pollution. The air was too clean there. So we thought, how do we come back to India, because that's where the raw material is. We wanted to dig for air pollution. And for some reason, randomly I dropped into Bangalore, because 8 years ago I did a small internship here. So I just came back to Bangalore. Hey, India is rising and stuff is happening. And we took a lab, completely unaware of what would happen, because my background isn't automobiles. Our team's background isn't automobile. We took a nice office in Indiranagar, and this is what started happening to office spaces. Things were set on fire, experiments failed. Our landlords kicking us out, like, you need to find yourself a garage. These kind of experimentations cannot happen. And after like series of such experimentations is when things stabilize. This is one experiment. You'll see Nishit over there sitting at the back.
3, 2, 1, go!
Things used to happen like when experiment with particulate, like terrible things would happen. So this is how it started, like experimenting with particulate, capturing it, and trying to make it happen in India. Eventually, things stabilized. We moved to a garage, and in the garage, we started doing these experiments of making these weird space, science fiction-y looking prototypes, connecting it to these cars and driving these cars around Bangalore. People would wonder what the hell is happening. This actually is an exhaust output fed into a capture system where the car would function the way it would function normally, but the pollution that would have otherwise gone into the environment now from the car, by pollution, by the way, here I mean particulate matter, is now being captured inside the system. So there's a small animation of how it works. Essentially, you connect it to the tailpipe of an exhaust system. It could be your diesel generator, it could be a chimney, and the moment it turns on, all that particulate matter, which is PM 2.5, which is so fine that it penetrates your lungs and gives you cancer eventually, is now captured within this system. And there are no replaceable parts, so it's not a filter, it's a filterless filter. Eventually, that carbon can be collected in this dry form, as I showed you in this test tube. What we are working on right now, apart from the technology part, is how do we deploy this technology at scale in India right now? There is no dearth of emission sources. There are diesel generators, there are cars, there are chimneys. How do we deploy this at scale? So imagine if we, I think I'll skip this part because I think we're doing short with time. I'll show you another video of what we do with this entire thing. So what was a silly experiment back then is now this.
Air pollution is more than 80% in Metro Manila.
Air pollution levels in the British
we should see a huge environmental impact.
According to the World Health Organization, even trigger lung
And so Delhi, they're once again topping the pollution chart. Situation in Beijing, the air being dirty records.
Air ink is about capturing air pollution before it enters the environment from your cars, from your trucks, from your diesel generators that are spitting out this particulate matter and then converting that into inks of various sorts.
We did the initial research and prototyping for this idea at the MIT Media Lab. For the last 3 years, we have been getting our hands dirty on the roads of Bangalore to solve this problem. After we are done capturing air pollution, we take it through a purification process and then we treat it with solvents to create printing inks.
Developing new ways to be able to paint and create without the negative.
All the artwork that you see happening in this video is done from air pollution captured in India. And essentially, any of these artists that are painting over here are the artists we haven't ever met ourselves. So we just send our inks, and it creates this adoption mentality within artists and printing companies around the world that can we reuse this pollution that was once entering the environment in our lungs now for printing methodologies and so on. I think this video you can find online, yes. So I'll go further. So this experimentation stabilized and we started taking this idea internationally. So we started doing campaigns in Hong Kong, London, and everywhere around the world, trying to see how people react to this idea. We started retrofitting trucks to capture air pollution. So that says that this truck is making air ink, not air pollution. Air ink is the brand of inks that we have created that are made by recycling air pollution. We started collaborating with really large-scale graffiti artists around the world to create really large artworks that would bring communication and interest of people in the whole air pollution capture scenario. I have a pen on me, you can try. So this pen that I have over here is approximately, it contains about 40 minutes worth of air pollution that comes out of a standard diesel car.